Hi, Peter Wolfkamp, resident builder, and we're back at our host project. This was a renovation we started 2 years ago, and my intention at the time was always to build this little cabin. Could be a sleep out, could be a home office here in the backyard. And I have to say that one of the things that's excited me about this little project is that I've wanted to introduce some new ideas. There's some really clever thinking going on around building at the moment, and so I've been able to incorporate some of those ideas in this project. So let's start with the roof. So I'm framing up with J-frame, the LVL timber, fantastic span, great strength, really straight. Then I've gone over the top with a ProClimber Explorer building wrap. On top of that, I've got a cavity batten before I put my purlins on for my roofing iron. What I'm aiming to achieve here is ventilation through the roof space, which, because it's a dark roof and tracks a lot of heat, that heat will be able to circulate around and vent out of the roof up here once I've finished my flashing. So that's part of my thinking. I'm going to pack this full of green stuff insulation as well. I've also opted to use IBS rigid wrap on the exterior. So all of the exterior of the building is sheathed in this OSB board, which has a building paper membrane on the outside, and then we've taped all the joints. So in effect, we're getting a little bit closer to air tightness. It also has provided a great deal of stability, bracing to these frames, and it makes it weather tight as soon as I've closed it in. This little cabin, I actually framed this up at home and I used J-frame, and I have to say that framing it was a delight. Standing the frames up and straightening them, well, to be honest, that was no trouble at all because of the inherent stability in the LVLs in the J-frame. A couple of other things that I've done here. Now, typically, for all you builders out there, we'd go stud block stud, right? That's how you always did corners. That's how you do them over there. One of the issues with stud block stud is that your insulation is often missing in the corner, so it creates like a thermal bridge. Simply by taking my framing right through, leaving out the block and that inside stud, which is often there just to fix my jib plasterboard lining, means I can get my insulation right to the outside, and then I can take care of the corner using a simple rondo right angle. That's going to make that corner warmer. It's actually more efficient. So that's kind of a new way of thinking about corners and insulation. This is a more traditional way. Stud, nog, stud, block, stud, stud. Typically, you'd end up with no insulation in there. We were thinking ahead, so before we put the rigid wrap on, we had some insulation, filled up all of those pockets in there. Again, trying to think about all of those areas where you might potentially have some heat loss. Another feature that we're adding into this cabin is that, potentially it might be unoccupied for a period of time. How do I ensure that it doesn't get cold and damp inside? So before I do my tiles over the top, I'm actually going to do a complete underfloor heated system from the guys at Warmup. That will just mean that in winter, it'll keep this room at a certain temperature, let's say 16 or 17 degrees, enough to keep away all that nasty mold that can grow in a building that might not be opened all of the time. Saying that, thinking about ventilation, I made sure that my awning hung windows actually have a latch that allows it to be left slightly open to ensure that I've got a little bit of ventilation in this space. A couple of other things that we're going to do, which I think is going to make this really cool, and I was working this out the other day. So there's the center of my room, and then I'm going to use some tongue and groove paneling from Jukin, New Zealand. So it'll be 400 wide, great big strips of paneling coming up the wall and then all the way across the ceiling. So I think that'll add some real interest to this space. To be honest, I can't wait to get it finished. I think this is going to be a great little building, and it'll be better than most. Now that we've pretty much got the framing up, I got my roof on, just waiting on flashings. I'll do some insulating over the weekend. We'll get the linings on. And it's been a lot of fun for me to think about some new ideas that we've got in building, to introduce them into this building. And what I'm aiming for is a better build.